Ed.
All right, so what we're going to do is today we're going to give you tips on how to plan a virtual pit. So first, let's talk about what exactly is a virtual pit.
A virtual pit is where teams come to meet together online and have a presentation to share what your team has done throughout the season. Some teams decide to show all aspects of their progress, such as outreach, robot building, CAD, etc., while some teams focus on only one thing. Both are good, simply team preference on which one to do. The virtual pits are typically hosted on Zoom, and each team has a separate room that they belong to, that others could come and go to. Often, visitors are encouraged to change pits every 10 minutes, so keep your presentation short. It's important to remember that during competition, judges may sometimes come into the room to see your progress. If you're visiting a pit during competition and a group of judges come into the pit, please quietly and graciously move out of that team's pit unless you're a member of the team hosting that pit. And finally, the team pit should be the work of the student team members. Now, let's move on to what should be included in your virtual pit.
So before talking about what exactly should be included in your virtual pit, I want to share what Fixit does personally during virtual pits is what we do. We split into two groups during a virtual pit. One group stays and they uh, present their presentation in the breakout room, while the other group goes off into different pits. And everyone from the browsing group would find different breakout rooms with other teams, and typically we try to stay away from joining the same breakout room as someone else on our team so that we gather more information from different teams. And at the halfway point, we would switch roles so that everyone has an opportunity to visit other pits, and everyone that did present gets to present their pit. Now, what should be included in your virtual pit? Your pit should have all necessary or interesting things about your robot and team. That'll be like a cool, fancy mechanism that your team designed, or an interesting outreach event that you ran. And you need quite a bit of images. And don't go crazy with images, but have like enough photos to show your robot from a few angles, and your mechanisms and key aspects in all the photos you take. And CAD photos are widely encouraged as well. Your videos are also okay, but keep them short and make sure the team members are talking about what's in the video. Something that Fixit did was one time our video had someone talking in it, and the audio just wasn't great. So just don't try it. It doesn't work out great. Last but definitely not least, you're going to need positive attitude, a lot of enthusiasm, because with boring presentations, you lose everyone's attention. They'll stop listening to you, and they take away no information whatsoever. So keep your presentation lively and exciting. It'll be better for everyone. Now, how exactly do you plan for a virtual pit?
I was muted. Let's try that again. The most important thing to do when planning your virtual pit is to decide the format of your virtual pit. Or would you like to focus on, like a single topic or many different topics? Would you like to only present or visit other teams? If you do, how will you rotate? The format of your virtual pit lays the foundation of your pit. Next, creating a timeline. When will you finish creating the presentation? When will you be host for the pit? Creating a timeline will help you keep your preparations on track and not leave you scrambling the night before the pit. Although not mandatory, it is highly recommended for all team members to have the same team background, such as Fixit at the moment. It's like a team uniform. And please remember to change your screen name to include your name, team name, and number. And of course, remember to rehearse. Now, let's welcome Atomic Robotics to showcase their pit.
Hi, we are 3805 Atomic Robotics, an FTC team based in Edmonds, Washington. Today, our presentation will cover some of the outreach we've done, our two robots, and some programming. These are all of our social media handles, and we are accessible through any of these, so if you'd like to keep in contact, we'd love to hear from you. These are all of the members of our team. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to take a team photo this year because we haven't been able to have meetings in person. Despite not being able to meet, we have still been very active on all fronts, including outreach. The photo on the left is from a donation drive we organized for a local organization serving homeless youth. The top right is a Women in STEM workshop we hosted with the terrific TechBots, where we invited industry professionals to speak about their experiences as women in the STEM field. And then the bottom right photo is from a cleanup we did at Yost Park, which is part of what we do as a member of Echo First. Because of our outreach efforts, we have been recognized in our community and have had people reach out to us asking for help in various things. For example, with our district's Challenge for Change initiative, we have been asked to help with the February Black Lives Matter 5K virtual run.
Like Meg said in the intro, we've been working on 2 competition-ready robots. The Go Builder robot is the first of the 2. We have already designed, built, tested, and is now in the autonomous programming phase. We designed it completely in Onshape since due to COVID restrictions, we could not work in person. Then we sent all the parts to one person, again, due to COVID restrictions, so she could build all the parts and have the robot ready for competition.
This is our intake. As you can see, it consists of 5 custom parts, 2 each of the walls and 1 base, and it all comes together with the Actobotics parts. In reality, surgical tube is mounted onto the shafts, but we chose not to include that in the CAD. Like Isaac said, it was designed completely in Onshape before being cut out with our CNC machine and being assembled, and it has been almost fully tested at this point.
For the shooter, we decided to go for a straight single wheel shooter. We started by making a simple prototype that you can see on the top right, so we can test different variables such as ring compression. Once we did all our tests, we compiled them into 2 spreadsheets, one for accuracy that you can see on the bottom right, and another very similar for distance. Once we got our preferred setup, we took the measurements and put it into Onshape and designed the final shooter that we then put on the robot.
These are our wobble goal designs. Gen 1 had a longer arm and a servo-driven pulley system to operate the grabber. However, the arm length proved to be too unstable for effective use. With Gen 2, the arm length was shortened and a 45-degree angle was added for more flexibility with mounting. The servo was also moved up to the front of the arm and controls the grabber with greater stability.
Like I said earlier, we've been working on 2 competition-ready robots. The Tetrix Robot is the second of these robots. Again, we designed it completely in Onshape. One of the main reasons why we wanted to build this robot is so we can test different mechanisms to see which ones might be better. For example, the launcher, we decided to go for a double wheel launcher instead of the single wheel that we have on the Go Builder robot. Through our tests, we've learned that the accuracy is about similar and the distance is about similar as well. For the intake, we decided to change from the surgical tubes to a compliant/roller design. The intake itself is very similar to the Go Builder robot, just slightly wider due to the different chassis.
This year, we decided to learn some more advanced and competitive programming techniques than what we've used previously. Over the last few months, we started using a library called Roadrunner, which allows us to create complicated spline paths like the ones on screen. While we're following these spline paths, we can turn while driving, and thanks to our Mecanum chassis, we can even turn independently of the direction that we're driving in. To use Roadrunner, we need to know our position at all times. We use non-driven wheels to do this, which are essentially omni wheels that are attached to encoders but are not attached to motors. The encoders can measure the number of times each wheel has rotated, which tells us how far the robot has moved. And we can't just use encoders that are attached to our regular drive motors because our drive wheels will often slip, especially while strafing. Finally, we use a tool called RR Path Visualizer, which allows us to create these simulations of our Roadrunner paths like the ones that you see on screen. We used Tensorflow object detection this year to recognize the different amount of rings in the starting stack of the autonomous period. The built-in Tensorflow program wasn't entirely accurate when it came to differentiating between 1 and 4 rings. So we wrote our own program to differentiate based on the height and width values gathered from a mounted webcam. These values represent the pixel size of either 1 or 4 ultimate goal rings in comparison to the dimensions of the screen. We also have a modifiable confidence percentage that can be used to determine whether something is really a stack of rings or if it's just background. If the program finds no recognitions, no rings in a certain startup time, then it just decides that there aren't any.
Thank you for listening.
Awesome. So now we're going to go over why that pit worked and what you can do to get inspired from that pit when you're creating your own pit. So the first thing we really liked about this pit was the introduction. They introduced their entire team and then they told us what they were going to talk about: outreach, building, and programming. We also liked the social media shoutouts that they had. So that's something you might want to consider doing. If your pit, another team likes your pit, having your social media there means that you can.
Something else that they did great was they had a lot of enthusiasm and confidence when they were talking. So, and their voices were really easy to hear and they were very comprehensible. Um, and they showed a lot of CAD images, as I suggested earlier. Uh, and that was great of them so that I could see some of their key aspects of their robot that they didn't have in some of their pictures or other images. You could see that through CAD, and that's why CAD is important.
Speaking of CAD, they had very good pictures relative to the topic. So when they talked about the mechanism, there was CAD and there was zoomed out CAD, so you knew where the mechanism was relative to the robot. There were handmade sketches for programming to show paths as well, which also helped with the programming parts.
And they also separated their useful information from the other excess information that they had. So all the key importances of their presentation was highlighted and made sure that that point was gotten through, as opposed to anything else that they might have had. And they discussed all their robots and their purposes. They have 2 robots, and they discussed their purposes for those robots. Whereas if they didn't, everyone would just be like, "Oh, why do they have 2 robots?" So it's really important that they did that as well.
Something we like to highlight is the notes in their slides were very simple and very good prompts. Something that some teams might fall in the rabbit hole of is writing a lot of text for a slide because they're scared they're going to forget something. But keeping that slide simple means it's easier for the audience to look at, often like a class presentation. We also picked Atomic because they had a very good way of concentrating on their building. They covered every mechanism on their robot very well, very thoroughly. We knew what each mechanism was for and how it worked, but very briefly. They didn't go into 10 minutes on a single mechanism, but they talked about it enough for us to understand what each part was about. So it was a very brief and comprehensive look at the robot. And what your team could do in order to improve or get inspired from the team is look at what sort of social medias they're doing. And then also, they talked a bit about COVID, which was very cool. We're in a weird year right now. And so talking about how COVID has shaped your team throughout the pit is a very good way to talk about your journey and how you've gone through challenges.
Something else you could do is talk about outreach and some key examples of outreach, like Atomic did. So they talked about all the workshops they did with like women in FTC and all that, which is really important. And that's and it looks really good for your team as well. So make sure you have outreach and have those key examples. And it was a great presentation as well.
All right, so next up, we're going to invite S.K.I.D, and they're going to present their pit, and then we'll talk about what they did well, because they also have a really good. Take it away.
Already? Hello, we are Team 417 S.K.I.D. I'm Lian. Thank you for listening to our presentation today. This is our team screenshot from one of our calls. On the sides are our sponsors, and at the bottom is all of our contact information, as well as our location. We are based out of Woodinville, Washington. Some of the things our team values is service, fun, and respect. We are constantly looking for opportunities to teach what we know. Here's some photos of us doing presentations in various areas in our community. Here's some more photos of that. In the top right is a CAD class that was taught a few summers ago from some of our CAD specialists. And at the bottom right is a picture of some of the volunteer work we did at a farm over the summer. And then here's Kashvi.
Hi, my name is Kashvi, and I'm going to be talking about the robot design. So we use Fusion 360 as part of our design process to CAD our robot, and then we build prototypes. Some pictures are shown. And one of our members also does physics in order to some more calculations and make our building more precise. And in software, we use Android Studio to program our robot, and we use SourceTree and Git and GitHub for version control. And this season, we're using OpenCV to count the rings and track the goal in order to improve our launching mechanisms.
Hi, my name is Flynn. So 6 years ago, our team began a new long-term project to bring First Lego League to Botswana in Southern Africa. Our ultimate goal was to distill a season's worth of FLL into just a 5-day long camp. Our original goal was to teach a group of 20 middle school and high school teachers. So then they could go back to their local villages and start their own First Lego League teams there. To fundraise, we started, to fundraise and to test our curriculum, we held summer camps for elementary school kids, and we also held the same camp for senior citizens in a I forgot what they're called, in a nursing home, I guess, and military veterans as well. In the summer of 2019, our team actually traveled to Botswana to teach our camp, and we taught a group of 30 teachers, actually, from our original goal of 20 teachers. And we taught them about everything from building and programming a robot to core values, to fundraising and working on the research project. So here's a few photos from that camp. So after the camp, the teachers went back and successfully created 12 new First Lego League teams. Most of them were in the southern region of Botswana. Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Caitlin, and I'm going to be talking about more of the impact that we made and where the FL teams in Botswana are at currently. So after that summer, those 12 teams that were established, they went to compete in the next FLL season, which was City Shapers. And so they competed in their first tournament at which was hosted by the University of Botswana. And 3 of those teams, they went on and advanced to the South African FLL Championships. And since then, we have kept in contact with those teams. And one of our team members actually mentored one of those teams that was established there. So currently, due to the pandemic, the country was shut down. So that hindered their ability to participate in FLL. But the organization that we partnered with, Dare to Dream, they have been focused on still keeping kids engaged in STEM, and they have been hosting virtual hackathons and summits and other events that kids can participate in to keep them interested in STEM. And now I'm going to pass it on to Isaac to talk about where our team is currently.
Hi, this is here. Oh, here are some of our team's best moments. On the left, you can see one of our team members volunteering, and on the right, there are some different images from the beginning of our season when we could meet outside socially distanced, assessing the ease of ring tossing and figuring out the coefficient of friction for the rings. So because of COVID and we haven't been able to meet in person for most of the season. Because of this, we use 2 different programs. One on the left being Google Meets to meet virtually, and on the right, a program called Wonder, which allows us to meet and then kind of break out, similar to breakout rooms, but not quite the same. We also use Slack for a lot of collaboration and scheduling, and Discord sometimes for fun.
And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you guys for listening, and let us know if you have any questions.
Awesome. So now we're going to go over what this pit did right and how you can get inspired.
Great presentation. So what they did well was they had a really aesthetic and colorful first slide, which is a really which it really grabs your attention. It's like they kick it off really well, saying, "Hey, look at our presentation," and everyone listens because it's a really good first slide. It's really engaging as well. The way they talk is like, it's like they want to give you information, might as well just take it, you know? And they talked about unique things such as all their values and and certain stuff like that, and also their team activities.
They show lots of different CAD designs, which help to see the design process of the robot and showing us what software they use. So, yeah. And they also covered lots of different topics, and yet they said the main focus, which was on outreach.
Like we mentioned before, they covered a lot of topics, but in a way that left some room for questions. This, as we mentioned with Atomic Robotics, this is very important for your pit because you will use a similar format for your pit for judging interviews, and you want your judges to know everything that your team does while still leaving a lot of room for questions depending on what sort of judges they are. So that is a very good model if you're thinking about what you want to do for covering stuff. They talked about a lot of unique things, and especially they talked about COVID like Atomic, but a little more specific, like they had a slide for whatever video platform they used. So that kind of talked about how they adapted in this weird time.
And like always, like you should all do, they organized it and they rehearsed it. I cannot stress it enough. This is incredibly important. We rehearsed this so many times just so that we can like get this right. All right, like organizing and rehearsing is so important. Cannot stress it enough. Do it. Rehearse. It was on that other slide. It says it right there. If it's in words, it's important.
And the length was a good even 6 minutes for presentation, which leaves 4 minutes for questions. 5 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions is the goal, but getting around that is perfect.
And finally, think about what sort of unique things S.K.I.D put in their pits, and think about what unique things your team could bring to your pit. So for S.K.I.D, they talked about their core values. For Fix It, we love talking about fun team activities during our pit. What makes your team unique, or what is something cool that you did? And add it in to just give yourself that little flair of diversity, of difference to stand out. All right, now we're going to go back to our presentation and talk a bit about what to do when you're visiting pits. So the first and very key thing that you want to do when you're visiting pits is listening. This is very, like, obviously very obvious, but it can be difficult when you're listening to pits all the time and you're going from pit to pit and it's online and it's tiring. So what really helps our team is that we ask everybody to take notes about each pit that they're doing and then share the notes with the team after the virtual pits. This is something we do at competition even, and it allows us to be inspired by other teams, explore what's possible in FTC, and understand the thing better. So maybe we're working on a shooter and we'll say, okay, what do other teams do when they're building their shooter? And maybe we'll discover like a new kit that a team used, or we'll discover a new method or a new gearing that another team used. So keep in mind what sort of things you want to learn and see if you can take notes on that specific thing, whether that be outreach or building. The last thing here, and personally, the most important is turn your camera on when you're visiting pits. A lot of people don't like doing it. I get it. It's awkward. You're at your house. You don't want other people to see you like staring at them. But in the year where it's COVID 2021, a lot of the first community is fractured and it's hard to meet people. So even a little thing like turning your camera on can really go a long way in feeling like it's a normal year, like you can connect with people. And also there's nothing more weird than doing a pit presentation with maybe like 2 people in the room and you can't see them. So it's kind of like you're doing a presentation to a blank wall. So always try to turn your camera on if you're comfortable, because as a presenter, when I did virtual pits, anyone who turned their camera on, it always feels a lot better. Next slide. Yes, asking questions. Another very key thing when you are visiting virtual pits. Often there'll be a 5-minute presentation and there's a 5-minute space for Q&A. And often it's hard to think of Q&A questions because you won't be thinking of them during the presentation. But again, as a presenter, there's nothing more awkward than having no questions at the end. And even if your question feels stupid or weird, ask it, because as a presenter, like I said, talking to other people who are presenters, answering questions is one of the most fun things about doing virtual pits, because that is really the conversational part of virtual pits. like I mentioned before, come into a virtual pit thinking about what you want to know. Do you want to know about outreach? Do you want to know about a shooter mechanism? Do you want to know about drive bases? Do you want to know about fun team activities teams do? And then use that as your basis for asking questions. So you can ask every team, can you go back to the slide where you talked about this? I want to hear more about this. It doesn't even have to be a specific question. You can just ask for more information on a certain thing, and teams would be delighted to answer. Finally, ask follow-up questions. That's a great way to get a conversation going and getting a report going, and to understand and learn more about other teams. I've made a lot of friends through virtual pits, and a lot of it is about making the effort and trying to connect. It's harder online, but making the effort and you'll find a really fun community to hang out with.
So here are some pit pro tips that you guys should know. So always have something ready in case there are no questions. Typically, when you have a virtual pit, you have time for questions so that someone can ask a question. You know, you have time to answer it. Typically, that'll take like 5 minutes. But say there is no questions, and now you have time to kill. You need to find something that you could find something to basically like. I don't want to say stall, but like yes, stall. And yeah, so that could be like CAD or a robot video, a few images, some team activities that you guys have done, et cetera, et cetera. And as I mentioned before, rehearse at least a few times with your teammates and just make sure you're ready for it in case there is no questions. And just, you can never be too prepared.
Now, unfortunately, virtual pits are very similar to our robots. It works perfectly when you're rehearsing and practicing for a match, but the moment you actually go in competition, it dies. So it is absolutely vital to be prepared for all sorts of problems when presenting your virtual pit. A team member may suddenly crash, like the internet may suddenly crash, your presentation might not be shown, a micro camera doesn't work, anything can happen. Or if I get to unmute like me. The best way to prepare for it is to be familiar with everyone's sections. This doesn't mean you have to remember everyone's sections, just be familiar with it so that you can pick it up if it comes to it.
Actually, this morning when we were setting up for our pit, Amran's mic didn't work, and we had to spend like 10 minutes fixing it. So it does happen decently often, but as long as you can improvise, adapt, and overcome these challenges, you should be able to do pits. So like Hanson mentioned, make sure team members know all the parts. You might be a programming master and you don't know that much about the drive base, but see if you can understand at least what your team member is going to say. Because if they can't show up or if their mic doesn't work on the day of, they're going to need someone to cover. And that's especially important if judges start going around in the virtual pits. Have a backup plan if slides don't share. Sometimes screen sharing is weird on Zoom or Hangouts or whatever. So make sure you can do the presentation without the slides. And finally, if there are any videos, videos are often the most technical difficult part of any presentation. So make sure you can continue without the video, or maybe you could send the video URL to the chat for them to watch on their own time. All right, we'd like to send a huge thank you to both of the teams. Oh, can you unshare and reshare? I think it didn't update. We'd like to send a big thank you to these two teams who've helped us. No, it's not refreshing. Okay, well, we can put those in the chat. We'll send you your Instagrams and their websites, and they have the resources for their virtual pits that you can look at. And thank you so much for helping us, and we hope you learned about virtual pits.
I am just trying to see, can I get to refresh? I got it to refresh. So this is a prime demonstration of technical difficulty. Here we go. Turn it on and off again. That's the #1 rule.
Hanson is absolutely correct. We made Amran's audio work by turning it on.
It was a nightmare.
Thank you for listening, everyone. Any questions?
For us or for any of the teams who are presenting? And feel free to drop it in the chat or just unmute yourself if you have.
I'm going to do your stall technique. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Armin, what's your favorite ice cream flavor?
My favorite ice cream flavor is either give me a second.
So we have a how would you keep your presentation engaging even if your slides don't work? Inez, I think this one's perfect for you.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways to make a presentation engaging. We didn't mention it in our presentation, but you can have props during your presentation. So some teams have brought prototypes of their robot, or some teams send their robot to a team member. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have to, like as a big part of your presentation, just because it is kind of awkward to be like, here's the robot, like, and lift your camera up, depending on what sort of format you have for, like, if you have a laptop camera, it's a little awkward. But bringing props for that backup is a very good tip. Otherwise, just making sure that you can talk engagingly, maybe asking questions to your audience, and getting through all of the material properly.
Another question we have, what platform are you using for your presentation? Personally, we use Google Slides. I don't.
Does Atomic and S.K.I.D wanna say what they use?
We use Google Slides too.
Yeah, us as well.
I know one other presentation format some people use is Canva, but it just depends on which one you prefer to use. There's no mandatory platform.
And all of the examples you saw, we use slides just because it's easier to get pictures on. But if you want to do something else or something more creative, that's totally up to you.
Make a giant poster and go around it. I mean, you can do that if you want, but.
Any other questions? Do I have to use my stall technique?
You never told me what your favorite ice cream flavor was.
Oh yeah, either chocolate mousse or strawberry. I like them both.
Okay, I
Chocolate
think
mousse
we
and
can
strawberry.
wrap up the presentation before things go too far into the ice cream world.
Oh, okay.